So kia ora, koutou katoa, welcome to Early Literacy Clinic. Our topic today is phonics assessment, and I get a lot of questions about this, so I'm happy to have a short amount of time just to really focus on the stages where I get the most part-time, most questions, and they are stages 4, 5, and also I get questions about transfer. So let's go through stages 4 and 5 in particular, and a lot of the things I'm going to say here are relevant to all the stages. Now, at stages 4, 5, 6, and 7, there are two pieces of assessment for phonics. We do a reading assessment and we do a writing assessment. Okay, so the reading assessment is we have an assessment question, which is in the phonics manual. So you write it out on a card or something, and children come up one by one and read the question. And then that's a tick. If they can read it, then they've passed it. If they can read it, we move on to the writing assessment. That's not one-on-one. You can do that with a whole group or the whole class. Make sure they can't copy. I often will take them to like the library or the hall where you can physically have them spread out so that they can't copy from each other. Now, this is a silly sentence. You dictate the silly sentence and they write it. And they're really familiar with that because they've been doing that in their phonics lessons up to now. So that's not a problem. Well, what I have said about the phonics assessment at stage 4 is that they have to get 100% to move on. And I want to unpick that and make a couple of comments about that. Because what we do not want tamariki doing is if they fail stage 4, and I find most of them do fail stage 4 the first time I give the assessment. I don't want them doing stage 4 on repeat. In fact, you might want to write this down on a post-it and put it in your planning folder. Do not teach stage 4 twice. Why do I say that? Well, there's two reasons. One, it won't work. The reason we teach stage 4, the learning objective for stage 4 is to teach blending and segmentation. But when children fail stage 4, it's very unusual for it to be because they couldn't blend or segment. The number one reason I find that children don't pass stage 4 is because they're confused about their vowels. So it's not actually going to work teaching stage 4 on repeat because that is not what we really push at stage 4. So it won't work if the problem wasn't actually blending and segmentation. The second most common problem for why children have issues at stage 4 is because they're not hearing sounds in order. So what I would do instead is next week in my phonics session is go back and teach what the assessment showed me the problems were. So probably I'm going to be doing vowel drilling, and I've got some videos up on my website about how to do that, and I covered that in the primary phonics course, if you don't recall. And also I might do quite a bit of work on dictation to make sure they are hearing sounds in order, and I will hammer it every day in phonics for 1 or 2 weeks until I think, okay, I think they've got this. Give the assessment again, see if they're ready to move on. The other reason I say don't teach stage 4 twice is because it gets really boring. I mean, stage 4 really underpins stage 5, 6, and 7. And if you've taught stage 4 again and again because they didn't get it the first time, so you taught it all over again and they still didn't pass it the second time, and then you taught it again, you've kind of spoiled it for stage 5, 6, and 7 because those stages are based on stage 4 and they're very similar. And children get to stage 5, they're like, oh, not this again. So my advice is teach stage 4 once, teach it really well. Like, don't go on to the assessment unless you think they are ready for it. Teach it really well, and then use the assessment to look at what the problems actually were, and then teach that. And then what you'll find is the problems are going to be roughly the same, I find, amongst the children. And look at this assessment on the screen here, and you can see with my student here, he definitely can blend a segment. You can see it. So there would be no point teaching him stage 4 twice because he can blend a segment. But you can see he's got issues. I just drew a line here. What did he know? What did he not know? Of course, it's those blinging vowels, isn't it? Always the vowels. So do some vowel drilling. And you can also see he's not hearing sounds in order. So when I mark each assessment, I make wee notes like that about like what is the actual problem, because the purpose of assessment is to inform planning. It's not to just do things on repeat. So from this assessment, I can see where the issues are, and that's what I'm going to go back and hammer. So that's why I say don't teach stage 4 twice. I am quite strict on stage 4 about getting 100%, but let's be realistic, kaya kuma, because if you've got, let's say you've got a large group of tamariki on stage 4, and most of them are ready to move on, but you've got a couple that didn't quite get 100%, well, obviously you're going to move them on with the others, because what, you can't really form a new group just for those tamariki, but you have to be very conscious of the fact that they didn't really pass stage 4 100%, and so you're going to make sure you are still doing your vowel drilling and try and fill that need as you go through stage 5, because it's just not practical to have 3 children all by themselves who didn't quite make the mark when the rest of the class has moved on. And look, the only time I would say teach stage 4 twice is if the student actually didn't get blendiness segmentation. But obviously you probably wouldn't have done the assessment because you're watching the whole time you're teaching to see if that's the case. In fact, here's a quick test. I gave this test this morning. I've got a group who are just finishing stage 4. And so I wanted them to do what I call the HIT test. So you can do this on a scrap piece of paper. I say to the students, right, everyone write HIT, and they each write the first word on their board, HIT. Under it, write hat. Okay, write hot. Write het. That's a silly word I always say in case they think it's a new word. Write hut. Okay, now let's read them. Go. Hit, hat, hot, het, hut. Now I have a look at everyone's work, and if they've correctly got the vowel in each of those 5 words, then we're ready to do the stage 4 assessment. But if I'm seeing a few confusions, and today I did see with, don't be surprised, and obviously those are the ones that often tamariki confuse, sometimes and so I'm thinking, oh, I won't do that assessment tomorrow like I planned. I'll probably do it early next week. I'm going to hammer my vowels before I take them to that assessment. So it's a super quick way of seeing if tamariki are ready for stage 4. And here actually is a photo of one of my students doing that HIT test there. You can see another example. Let's look at stage 5. There's something I want to clear up about stage 5, because when you come on the primary phonics course, I'm presenting to people and I've got to be like, we do this, we do this, we do this. But let me tell you something I didn't say on the course about stage 5. And that is, I actually do let children move on to stage 6 if they don't get 52 and stage 5 assessment, because let's think about what we are teaching at stage 5. There's 2 things. One, we're teaching all the consonant digraphs and trigraphs, like CK, BEL, LL, judge, DGE, and we're also teaching how to hear every sound in a word, and that's the most important thing we teach at stage 5. So I just want to say, look at a student's assessment. And okay, they may not have remembered every single digraph and trigraph you've taught them, but if they've heard and recorded every sound in the words that you dictated in the silly assessment sentence, well, I'd probably move them on, because you will get those other digraphs and trigraphs eventually, won't you? But hearing every sound, that's the key thing to teach at stage 5. And here's an example here from your manual. You can see my student got 40 out of 54. Technically, I wouldn't move that student on for that reason, but actually I would move them on because I can see the student is hearing every sound in a word. So if the majority of the children are hearing every sound in a word, then actually probably will move them on. Maybe I'll do a sheet where I just do a tally mark next to each grapheme if a child gets it wrong on the assessment. And if I find lots of children have forgotten, let's say they've forgotten the soft C or they've forgotten the PH, lots of children have forgotten CK, I might do that lesson again before I move on to stage 6. But if it's just a bit random and it's the only thing that's holding them back, I probably will move them on. The problem is, as I said, is that they can't hear every sound in a word. If you look at the assessments and the children are showing you they're missing out sounds, don't move on. You need to increase your phoneme fingers, do your phoneme lines, iconing boxes, pushing counters in, that kind of thing will really help them hear every sound. You don't want them moving on to stage 6 if they can't hear every sound. And the final thing I want to just talk about is the need for transfer, because sometimes I do get kayako emailing me and I say, look, Yolanda, we did this stage. It went really well. We thought we did the assessment. Tamariki passed. But the problem, they say, is that the children are not shown in their reading and writing. And I think the issue there really isn't phonics. The issue there is transfer. Be more explicit about the need for transfer. So tell the tamariki as you are teaching that you can use this in their reading and writing. I say, oh wow, look, we can hear 3 sounds in a word. So you've got to make sure when you're writing your story later, you can hear 3 sounds in a word. Or, oh wow, we can sound out words now. Make sure when you're reading, don't just get your mouth ready for the first sound, like I used to say to you to do, because you're now at stage 4. I want you to sound out that word or sound out the first bit of the word. So tell them at the time of teaching how they can use it later. Then model it in your shared reading and writing, and do that thinking out loud. Like if you're doing your shared writing, you go, oh, Tamariki, how can I spell rocket? Can you help me? Because we know how to hear two. Yes, thank you. And yes, the k, or it might be the t. So you say to the children in shared writing for them to help you, give you the sounds that you're teaching in that corresponding stage. So if you're teaching stage 2, you expect the children to be able to come up with one sound at shared writing that they can't, that they can hear, that you can write in the shared writing. If you're teaching stage 3, they've got to give you 2 sounds. If you're teaching stage 4, you want them to give you 3 sounds. And if you're teaching stage 5, you want them to be able to give you every sound in the word. And that's what you model in your shared. And then you demand it at your guided writing and reading, of course, as well. So at the start of guided writing, I might say before they start writing, oh, Tamariki, don't forget, you're stage 4 kids. So you've got to give me 3 sounds for any word you can't spell. And if they don't, insist on it. You've got to, some Tamariki, it wouldn't occur to them to transfer unless they knew that they absolutely had to. So be more explicit in your teaching of transfer, of how to take something I teach you here into there. So that's why the flow for me in phonics is, if I can, I like to start my literacy with phonics. I model it in my shared reading and writing, and I demand it in my guided reading and writing. So teach it, model it, demand it, and that's the flow for transfer. And just to remind you that the best teachers of literacy actively help children make connections between their text, sentence, and word level work. Phonics is word level teaching, but what's the point of teaching phonics if it's not in their reading and writing? All right, well, that's summing up my little talk about the stages 4, 5 assessment issues in phonics, and summing up what I think about transfer as well.